Namaste. I'm so up to here with Lakshmi Tantra. I had to just take a break and think about something else for a while. And these days, it's very rainy. I think there's a cyclone out in the Bay of Bengal, and we're getting typical cyclonic winds and rain bands. So it's been pretty drippy here the last couple of days, and it looks like it'll last a while longer. So anyway, I'm stuck inside, doing the best I can to keep busy. And so I want to talk a little bit tonight about the Hamming question. Richard Hamming was a researcher, mathematician, and engineer in the famous Los Alamos project, and later on at University of South California and some other places. And he was responsible for many important discoveries. But he asked this question, very important question, and it has two parts. The first part is, what are the most important problems in your field? And the second part is, why aren't you working on them? So he was a scientist, like I said, engineer, like that. But this is really applicable to any field. You look at your field, whatever it is, and what are the most important problems? Where are the biggest holes, huh? And then you have to ask yourself, why aren't I working on them? So let's back up a little bit, and then let's take a look at people who are great in any field. And what are the things they have in common? Well, they're totally dedicated and focused on their work, is one thing. But at the same time, even though they're very much focused on what they're doing now, they don't lose sight of the big view, the long-term aspects of their work. And another thing is, they don't give up. Of course, this has become now a cultural thing in startups in California that, failure is just a step on the way to success and all like this. But it's true. You often learn more from your failures than from your successes. And another thing is, luck is definitely a variable. Being in the right place at the right time. But now let's take a look. Who is it that gets to be in the right place at the right time? And there's a wonderful saying by Isaac Newton. Luck favors the prepared mind. Darwin also quoted this, or something quite close to it. In other words, luck or serendipity or chance happenings happen to everybody. But only those who have been prepared properly can recognize that this is a breakthrough. It's not just a mistake and I just throw it out and start over again. So wait a minute, why did this happen? And looking into the causes will often give you insights into the main problem that you're working on. And of course, it helps to have good association. People around you who stimulate you, who bring up ideas that are state of the art in whatever field they are expert in. And watching them work and watching how they think is always very interesting and rewarding. So, okay, here are all these, points in the mix, right? These elements of success. But what about the original question? What are the biggest questions or problems in your field, and why aren't you working on them? Well, the thing is, a lot of people would just like to have a quiet life, go home at 5 o'clock, to the wife and kids, and forget all about their work until the next morning. These people are not going to do anything great. They might do something good if they're competent, but good is different from great. Good advances the field incrementally, but great is a leap, a quantum leap. So what is the difference between a good worker or researcher or scientist or whatever and a great one? Well, the great one can't forget his work when he goes home at night. It keeps him up at night. He dreams about it. He's so obsessed with it, he can't let it go. And why does this prepare the mind to receive luck? Because the subconscious mind is being conditioned by the problem, by the question. And this is called in Zen Buddhism, standing in the question. It's like, I don't know the answer to this. This is too far out for me. This is too much. It's way out there. Doesn't matter. Stand in the question. Don't leave the area. Confine your thinking to what are the most productive avenues of approach to this problem. If you can't deal with the problem itself, maybe you can break it down. And the first thing to look at is, how can I even approach this problem? Okay, let's take a concrete example. My field is spiritual realization and teaching. So what's the biggest problem? Well, there are a few of them. The biggest one, probably, at least to my mind, is with all the religions and all the scriptures and all the teachers and all of the ashrams and everything around, why aren't more people getting enlightened? We should have a steady stream of enlightened people. And I think, well, the first thing that comes to mind is everybody's in a little box. Everybody's in their little sectarian group, and they define the spiritual life in terms of their teaching alone, and they measure spiritual advancement by progress in their method only. In other words, they're sectarian. They don't have an overview. They don't have the big picture. Why is that? Because most spiritual life nowadays takes place in organizations. And in the old days, it was guru and disciple, it was personal. But now there are these big meetings and conventions, at least before COVID, and there are now big organizations and ashrams with thousands of members and one guru. So how can the guru give anybody personal attention? It's not possible. It's become crowd control. Like modern education. It's just, there's no personal relationship there. So under those circumstances, it's very hard to deliver a teaching that addresses the students' difficulties and problems. And another thing is, the teachings themselves have become standardized. Now they're given in book form, or in seminar form, or in some kind of static form that's the same for everybody. But wait a minute, people have individual differences and preferences. They're all at different stages of the path. And to lump them all into one big group, and then you have to go through the same steps, is too regimented, You know, it's too conformist, it's too conventional. First of all, an intelligent person is never going to buy that. So you're going to get a bunch of less intelligent people. And so these people are not going to read outside or to study outside of the group's agenda. So they don't have any idea what's going on in other groups, what to speak of in completely other religions around the world. But you see, the problem with all organizations is that they want to keep you as a client, a customer, a contributor to their agenda. So it's in their interest to downplay your spiritual advancement, to negate your enlightenment, to invalidate your realizations. So they're not going to support you, especially if you actually attain the thing that they're supposedly teaching. See, this happened to me, several times, where I actually got the realization that the teacher was giving, and nobody would recognize it. So I left. And then I finally learned, after knocking my head against the wall several times, that spiritual organizations will never recognize you because you're not in the upper levels, the insiders circle or whatever of the group. And even if you are, the guru himself has a similar motivation not to recognize anyone who has actually made it. So this is a big problem. So now we have two big problems, or three. Nobody's getting enlightened. Nobody's studying the big picture. And if somebody does make progress, they're not getting acknowledged. Oh, and there's lots more. But let's look at that. How could you attack any of these problems? How could you even approach them? Well, you take a look at our channel. We've gone into existentialism, ontology, the Buddha's teaching, Rajneesh, and so many other teachings, Ramana Maharshi, now Sri Vidya, and so on. Not only that, we have allowed them to reflect on one another, to see them in terms of one another, and to analyze them in terms of a universal principle, ontology. So this is why we can deal with very, very different sets of information and yet see the things that are common among them and relate them to one another and put them in some kind of a big context. And we found our big context about 3 years ago. It is Shankaracharya's 4 views, Chaturdarshana. And I've put that chart up 1,000,000 times. I'm not going to do it again. You must be tired of seeing it. But you know what? You should learn it. Because it gives you a big, big context where you can put all the religions and all the belief systems in the world, and there's still room for more. And you can understand them in terms of it, and so on. So this was the breakthrough, really, that allowed me to get outside of any sectarian views and see things as a whole, see spiritual life as a whole. And that gave me an approach to the other problems. Why aren't people getting enlightened? And again, it's because of sectarianism. Each group deals with only a part of the spiritual puzzle, not the whole. So this channel and our teaching here deals with spiritual life as a whole. And anybody who comes up with any kind of question from any kind of background can expect a cogent answer. A helpful one too. And if people would simply meet my criteria, to show up and do some service, they would be able to become disciples and get a lot more personal help and instruction. So that would speed their path towards enlightenment tremendously. So this is what we're doing to identify and work on the biggest problems in our field. So then my question to you is, what are you doing? Om Tat Sat. Om Shakti Om.